Yeah. So like in the previous sessions, right, we have talked about the basic fundamentals of the integration part, right? So in the basic fundamentals, we have talked about the response format or request formats, including JSON and XMLs. Means initial two sessions we have conducted for the basic fundamentals that we have covered the how to like parse the JSON, how to generate the JSON, and when we are particularly like calling any third-party systems or APIs, we are, let's say we are receiving the response in the JSON or XML format. So how to do that? So that initially first two sessions we have dedicated, and also like we have covered about the REST API development as well. Like if I want to expose my Salesforce data to other systems, so obviously we have to expose our APIs that publicly, and other systems can particularly use our APIs to particularly access the Salesforce data, okay, which is stored in the Salesforce records in the form of Salesforce records, right? That we have covered. Now we are more moving towards the authentication part, okay? So either we are calling third-party APIs or our API we are exposing. So obviously authentications will be the most important part or important factor for now. Okay. So like today and tomorrow, means these two test sessions we are combining in one session. Okay. So like I have separated the two sessions, but we are covering in the one session only. Okay. So we have a total 3, 4 to 5 topics that need to discuss today. The one is like the remote site setting. Second one is the name credentials. Third one is the connected apps. Fourth one is that we are going to practically perform like how username and password based authentications like Salesforce from external systems, right? So I'm going to talk about with the help of Postman as well. Even we will do one real-time demo with the Salesforce to Salesforce integration. Mean we will call Salesforce API from Salesforce another Salesforce or okay. The process is same. If we are calling any API and I want to expose my Salesforce API, so the process is same for the other system as well. They have to follow the same guidelines and steps to call the Salesforce API. Okay, and we will talk about the access tokens as well, because access tokens will be the important part when we are doing the we can say authentication based callouts. Okay, from external system to Salesforce. The first 2 point will be dedicated for the we can say when we are we can say calling any third party API from Salesforce, right? So obviously we have to we can say authorize the endpoint URLs. Okay, basically. So remote site setting and name credential, these are the two we can say tools are available in the Salesforce itself. Like these are the we can say configuration part that are available. So there are, and both are the same things. There are the little bit advanced in the name credentials, but remote site setting is basically particularly authorize the endpoint URLs. Authorize means in the sense of you have to whitelist basically. Okay. And name credentials is the advanced version of the particularly a remote site setting with the more add-on features basically. Okay. So if I'm calling any third-party API from the Salesforce itself, and we have the base URLs are there. So base URLs needs to be particularly added in the configuration. Okay. Otherwise, it will be considered as a unauthorized from the Salesforce site. I will give you the one demo as well, like how you can particularly add the URLs in the remote site setting. And the name credentials will be the advanced version of we can say the remote site setting in terms of authentication basically. Okay. 1 second. Just let me. Yeah. So I will give you the one demo for the remote site setting as well as the name credentials as well. Okay. So basically name credentials specifies the URL for the callouts. Okay. Similar like in remote site settings as well. So whenever we are calling any external API, okay, I will give you the one examples like that. So let's go to the demo basically. Okay, this is our Salesforce org, and I want to particularly call any API from the Salesforce system. Okay, so basically, we will just cover the some dummy APIs are there. Okay, I will just give you the one example. This is the one we can say practice for the practice purpose. There is some dummy APIs are available. Okay. So particularly if I want to call this particular API, right, obviously I have to write the HTTP call out logic. Okay. So let's go to the Apex and I will just write down the some basic call out logic here. Okay. We can say employee API call out. Okay. And obviously for the call out, I need to write some basic fundamental like basic codes for the HTTP related. So let me just write down the one call employee API. So this one method I'm just creating. HTTP is an instance we need to create. And then HTTP request we have to particularly build actually. And in the HTTP request, we have to set the we can say endpoint URL, right? Because we are particularly calling that third-party API from Salesforce. So obviously we have to set the endpoint URL. Okay. So now I'm just copying the URL. This is our base URL, right? dummy.restapi.example.com. This is our base URL. And this is the resource name, right? Employees are the resource name. So this is the get type of APIs where this API will help out to get the employee details in the form of, we can say, JSON, right? So this returns JSON format. So basically we have to call this API. This is the complete API URL. This is endpoint URL. Okay. So this is the base URL up to the .com, right? And then we have the resource employees, the resource name, and then this is the kind of like naming conventions they're following for maintaining the versioning of the APIs. If there are some upgradations was happened. Okay. So this is particularly endpoint, and also obviously we have to set the method, set method. So this is the get type of method, which is just for the retrieving the data purpose. Okay. And then we have to use HTTP class to send the request, right? So this is the request. Now this send method will return the response, HTTP response. Okay, and from the response itself, particularly we can get the body. Okay, so get body will returns the whatever the response is coming from that API, which will be received as in the string format. Response from API. I'm just writing down and I will just print out the debug down. Okay. So now this is my simple API callout that particularly I'm using basically. Okay. Now the main important point is that whenever you are particularly hitting or calling any API, you have to particularly authorize or add that API in base URL into the particularly remote site setting to particularly authorize that. Okay. So I will just call now. Let me just call this API directly without adding it. Okay. And just particularly, let me just call this API, this method. Let me execute highlighted. Okay, see, I got the error. What is that error? Error is talking about callout exception unauthorized endpoint. Okay. So basically, as I said, if you are particularly calling any external APIs from the, we can say Visualforce space, from the, we can say JavaScript URL based or custom buttons or Lightning Web components are there, or from Apex itself. Okay. We are using the Apex as an example for understanding of the remote site setting. Okay. So you have to authorize that particular endpoint URL in the remote site setting if you are calling any external API from the Salesforce itself. As I said, if you are calling API from the Visualforce page, we have the functionality to call the APIs. JavaScript custom buttons are there. Then we have the Lightning Web components, LWC are there to call that API, right? So basically, there are multiple ways to call the external API from Salesforce system. So, and also the Apex as well. Okay. So you have to authorize that endpoint URL. Okay. Any endpoint URL. If you are particularly calling that API from Salesforce, we can say environment, obviously you have to authorize it. Okay. So otherwise it will use these particular exceptions to for the unauthorized endpoint. So they have giving that you have to add from the security setting like remote site setting. So from the setup itself, I'm just particularly going to the setup and just type a remote. So you will get a remote site setting option. Okay. So in the remote site setting, you can particularly add that. Okay. So I think I'm using the another different org actually. So let me just go to the main org that I want to build it. So let me just create a class again. So I'm using another different org actually. So if I execute, I will get that error. Okay, I think it's already there. So let me just go to the particularly remote site setting. Okay, I think I already authenticated that or added it into that. That's fine. Okay, I think I already added that. So let me just delete it first. Okay, now, so if you see here, they are giving the one example like the description. Below is the list of web addresses, okay, that your organization can invoke from salesforce.com. Okay, to add another web addresses, click on remote site. So basically, as I said, if you are like say hitting the any third parties API from the Visual Force page, from the Apex, from the custom JavaScript build buttons, right, or from the LWC or from Apex itself. So obviously, if you are hitting any APIs, so obviously you have to add web addresses that is called as an endpoint URL in the remote site setting. Okay, so remote site setting basically will authorize that endpoint URL from the Salesforce system. Okay, so if I call it now, just for the example, I got that error. Okay, so let me just, you have to click on the new remote site button. Then you have to particularly add the remote site name. You can use it any remote site name as per the your we can say structure or requirement. Okay, and let's say for example, let's say REST API, I'm just using this remote site name. Then you have to enter the URL. So what you have to do, you have to particularly enter the base URL only. Okay, if you copy the whole URL, still it will take only base URL. Base URL means from HTTPS to .com. Okay, this will be the base URL of your particularly REST API resource. Whatever the API you are calling, what will be the your base URL? That base URL will be a pick up by the system itself. Okay, so if I put all URL, it will only pick up to .com. Okay, because that will be the base URL. Then again, it will be basically a one option like disable the protocol security. So basically, this checkbox will be for the HTTP or HTTPS related. Okay, because there are the two protocols that we can use basically to call the HTTP APIs, right? REST APIs using HTTP and HTTPS yes as well. Okay, so this will be the for the security purpose, but like with that we have to properly follow the proper security guidelines on all. So instead of making all this, you need to consider all points related to the security purpose, and then you can check it out, check this. Okay, but the main recommended is that particularly use the proper secured way to particularly do that. Okay, so and obviously most of the APIs are not the HTTPS based. Okay, so basically for the security session security on all purpose. Okay, description you can put it, you have to make it active that, and then click on save. So this particular URL will be the added. So if you see, it takes only base URL. Okay, now I can particularly call this particular API. If I click on execute highlighted, now it will again, I think, oh sorry, I think my different org. Let me just execute again. Now it's I did not got error, right? If I click debug only, see my response is received. Okay, whatever the response which is sent by that API particular response are received from that API. Okay. So this is about the particularly the remote site settings are there. Okay. So basically remote site setting is very important to authorize that. Now let's jump to the second point that is called as a name credentials. I can say this will be the particularly we can say advanced version of the remote site setting. There will be the more features are added into the name credential. Okay, so name credential will also authenticate the third-party APIs basically. Okay, so if any third-party APIs, I have the security measures that needs to be followed when you are doing the callouts, right? So basically, what will be the required authentications you required for calling that API? You can use the advanced version of remote site setting that is called as a name credentials. Okay, and also you can skip the remote site setting basically. Okay, if you are using a name credential, you can skip the remote site setting. That will be the that is fine. Okay, means either if there is no any authentication, right? You have to, and that is the public APIs, and you have to just call that API. So you can use the remote site setting. But in the remote site setting, there will be the no any, we can say authentications things are there. Authentications means if any API are using the username or password based authentication or certificate based authentications are there, right? So that won't particularly are possible in the remote site setting. That's why I said the name credential will be the, we can say, upgraded version of the remote site settings basically. Okay, and the main important point is that if you are using the name credentials, all things are the secured. Means if you are using username and password based authentication, so password will be the, we can say encrypted format. Okay, so any other user will not able to see the particular passwords are there. Okay, one examples I will give. Let's say for example, sometimes what happens, let's say you are not using the name credential. Before name credential, actually you have the username, you have the password, okay, to authenticate that API. Okay, or you can say API keys are there. API keys will be also used for the authenticate the APIs. Okay, for the authentication purpose. Either you have to pass that API in the parameters, okay, or in the form of, we can say, headers. Header formats also is used for the passing the API keys. Okay, so what you are doing, you are maintaining that API keys or username or password either in the custom setting, okay, or either in the custom metadata, right, particularly, or I can say custom labels. Okay, so this will be the, we can say, used to maintain the static, because username or password cannot be changed for 3 months, 4 months, or 6 months, or maybe a lifetime as well, right? Or maybe after every 4 months or 6 months the password are expiring, but username and are there. But if you maintain the like custom settings or custom metadata or custom labels, right, basically, so if you are using custom setting or custom metadata or custom labels, your username or password will be the we can say visible for the users, at least for the system administrators of your let's say environment, right? I'm using, let's say for example, we can say custom labels, right? Custom labels is also we can use for the maintaining the static kind of data, right? At least either if I like password is changing every 3 months, still we can maintain the we can say that data into the custom labels, either in the custom setting as well, right? Because if you have, because these 3 things are used to maintain that static data, right? But if you, in terms of the, we can say API callouts, authentication parameters will be the very crucial parameters of any third-party system, right? Obviously, you have to be very secured and encrypted format. So name credentials are giving that functionalities. Okay, so if I go to the name credentials, you can create a name credentials for the system. Okay, and name credentials can be used for in the API callouts itself. Okay. So now the name credentials will be more upgraded now. If you see, this is the upgraded version of the name credentials. Okay. But there are the legacy systems is also available. Okay, so if I click here, new legacy, you will get options here to create a name credentials. Let me just go to the official documentation. Okay, if you saw here, this is the official documentation. Name credentials are a callout endpoints. Okay, basically these are the, we can say, upgraded version are the name credentials. Okay. So to simplify the authentication callout, authenticated callout, specify the name credentials as a callout endpoint. Okay. So if you are calling any external API, name credentials will be used as a, we can say, alternative of the particularly a remote site setting with the authenticated way, proper authenticated way. Okay. So name credentials is a logical entity that can be a thought as a named as a connection to external system. Okay, particularly. So if you go to the name credentials, okay, you can just go to the setup window. You will find out the name credentials option here, and from the name credentials itself. Now the advanced features have came in the name credentials, but you can use the legacy version as well from the setup. Okay, so you will be able to find out the new legacy option here. So now if I click on the name credentials, if you see the authentication section, this is the basic details. Okay, you can put the URL. Okay, let me show you. Before when we use the remote site setting, if we saw, we have used this API URL, right? But you can add that URL in the name credential itself. Okay, you can give the name, any particular label or label and name to the particular name credentials. Okay, and I'm just giving REST API. Okay, I'm just giving this name. Okay, you can put your URL. If any authentication are there, means that particular API is following any authentication, you can use this authentication section basically. Okay, there are two things: certificate. If that particular API are using certificate are there, so don't worry, I'm going to cover the some of the, we can say, examples in the next session. Okay, so I'm working on the one Java application basically to give you the demo about how certificate works. So now this particular today's sessions will be dedicated for the understanding of the name credentials, but we will cover out the one certificate based and authenticated based example as well. Okay, I'm working on the one Java based applications. So that particular API I'm going to call from the Salesforce itself, and then that particular API will provide the certificate to me. Okay, and then I can import that certificate into the Salesforce itself. So if there are certificate based are there, so we have to particularly add that certificate. Okay, then we have the we can say identity type in the authentication, like name principals, per user, or anonymous. Okay, if I use name principals, okay, so under the names principle there are 2 to 3 things for the authentication. Okay, either we can choose no authentication, means there will be the no authentication are there. So for example, this API there will be the no authentication are there. Okay, so and if there authentication are there, so there are multiple protocols are available, like OAuth 2.0 are there, password based authentication are there, right? If you select OAuth 2.0, so you need to select authentication provider and all. Okay, and scope are there, authentication standing, start flow are there, right? Then if you are there, let's say password based authentication are there, so you need to provide username and password are there. Okay, and then another one like AWS signature, JWT token exchange. Okay, so basically we are going to cover all these things into the next session as well. Okay, so now I'm just using no authentication for now. Okay, and in the another identity type option, we have the per user option is also available. Okay, so in the per user also, let's say OAuth 2.0 password authentication, these are the options are available. Okay, so we are using name principle. If there is no authentication, you can choose the no authentication as well. Okay, yeah, so I will give the answer. Name principal. Yeah. So Ravindra, I saw your questions now. So I will give you the we can say differentiation between per user and name principal as well. Okay. So no authentication and OAuth 2.0 password authentication. These are the we can say authentication protocols. So for now, I'm using no authentication right now. Okay. There are another call out options. Let's say you want to allow the HTTP headers need to be a merge fields, right? Allow merge fields to be in the HTTP headers. Let's say generate authorization header are there. Okay. HTTP body. So see some of the options that you need. Okay. So you can particularly use this option. Okay. Now let me just click on the save. This I'm using. Okay. Now let me just click on save. Okay, so now this is the name credentials is created. Okay, so you don't need to particular, now you can use these particular name credentials in the callouts itself. Okay, instead of using that particular we can say URL, you can use the particularly callout we can say name credential. So what you have to do, you have to use callout colon your particular name credential name. So my name credential name is REST API. So call out. I will give you the one example as well. Maybe they have given that here. Invoking callouts from the Apex. Yeah. So if you want to name credentials use in Apex. Okay, so let me just give to the, I will give you the one reference document so that you can use that. Okay, so see, particularly call out colon, you have to use call out colon your endpoint URL, whatever you are, you need to use it. Okay, so now let me just go to here. So now if you see, I'm not using directly endpoint URL, just call out colon and then my name credential name, and then whatever the specified resource URL are there, obviously you need to mention that. Okay, that is there. And now let me just particularly execute it. The same output will come here. Nothing will be changed. Okay. See, the output was same basically. Okay. And we are not using particularly any, we can say URL in the hard-coded URL are there, right? We are not using any hard-coded URL, so it will be there. Okay. And if I use any, we can say username or password based, we can say are there. So password will be the also hidden actually. Okay. For example, if I use password authentication, okay. And let's say I'm using, for example, let's say Aniket @testgmail.com. And I have put my password, let's say 112. I'm just using for example, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. So just example purpose. And if I click save, so see, basically it is a password based, but my username is a particularly are available, but password is hidden. So basically password will be encrypted into the backend, right? So name credential will particularly hide that encrypted that password, and it will be won't shown to the users. Okay. So as I said, if I used a remote site setting and there will be the authentication for that, so I need to maintain the username and password in the custom setting, custom metadata, or custom label. So it is chances to password will be visible for the user. Either it is a system administrator or other user if you are giving a we can say permissions to user to see the data, right? At least. So that will be a very we can say crucial part. So obviously name credentials has that functionality to encrypt that particularly password as well. Okay. So it will be encrypted and it won't be visible for the other users as well. Okay. So this is kind of a particularly name credentials that you can use it. Okay. For the call out purpose, if you are calling any third parties API. Okay. For that. Okay. So this is about the name credentials that you can use it to for that. Okay. We have the OAuth 2.0 as well. Okay. We have the authentication providers in the authentication provider. So don't worry. I'm going to give you the one demo as well for particularly calling Salesforce API actually. Okay. So I'm working on that part. So we are going to do the one Salesforce to Salesforce integration. Okay. So Salesforce to Salesforce integrations, we will use the OAuth 2.0 for authentication purpose. Okay. So if I go to the auth provider, I will show you. Okay, see, this is the authentication provider. So if you are using OAuth 2.0, OAuth 2.0 is the authentication will be the most widely used. Okay. So in the authentication itself, you have to give the some, we can say, data to authenticate that. Okay, that particular system. So let's say, for example, if you see, there are multiple options are there: Apple, Facebook, Git, Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft. Okay. OpenID Connect. Okay. And if you want to connect Salesforce to Salesforce are there, right? So we are going to solve one demo for the Salesforce to Salesforce integration ideal. Okay. So we need to use a consumer key, consumer secret key, authorization URL, token endpoint URL. Okay. That will be there. So authorization provider will be the gives the information about that system authentication. Okay. Means if they, for example, if this API are using the username and password based authentication, okay, or any JWT token based or any particularly OpenID Connect, so authentication provider that you can use for to particularly hold that data. Okay, like consumer key, secret key, any, we can say, token, access tokens are there, right? Endpoint URL. So every informations will be maintained by the authentication provider. Authentication provider will give you the information about the authentication, like what is username, what, and it will be also encrypted. Okay. So if I'm calling any third-party API, that they are following the some security mechanism to do that to authentication provider, and this authentication provider will be used in the name credentials. Okay. So name credentials is the, we can say, is used for the authentication setting. And if you are using, let's say, OAuth 2.4, any protocol, so based on the protocol, you have to particularly follow the authentication providers, which holds the information, authentication information about that particular API. Okay. So password based authentication are also, so for password based, you can directly maintain here. If you are using OAuth 2.0, obviously you need the authentication provider that maintains the secret key, consumer key, endpoint URL, authorization URL, everything are there. Okay, so these are this one. Okay, so we are going to do the demo about Salesforce to Salesforce integration, and we'll saw that basically, okay, using that. So this is about this the basic idea about the name credentials, like how we can, how, what is the name credentials basically. Okay, so this is one that we need basically to call that. Okay, so we can use name credentials and remote site settings into the particularly when we are doing the callouts, external API callouts. So I'm just separating out these two things. Remote site setting and name credentials is used for the particularly if you are hitting the APIs, okay, from Salesforce itself. Okay, and now we'll jump to the next part, that is connected apps. Okay, so connected app is basically used for the giving a permission, okay, to other external systems to connect with the Salesforce. Okay, that is called as a connected applications. Means I want to give the permissions to call my API. If I build that API are there, right? Let me just give you the one example. I will give you the one example as well. Okay. So connected app are there. So let's say, for example, this is my API. I have built this basic API to as a public API basically, and now I want like any external system can connect with the Salesforce with this API. Okay, so this API particularly are sending the accounts list basically to the third-party systems. Okay, so connected app basically uses the protocol to authenticate and authorize the Salesforce basically. Okay, so that's why I'll separate out these two things. is used for if you are calling any third-party API from Salesforce, and particularly connected applications or connected we can say apps is used to integrate external app with Salesforce. If you want to integrate we can say external app, so you need to call the Salesforce API from the external system. So connected apps will give the flexibility to share the Salesforce authentication things. Okay, so I'm going to give you the one demo as well, like with the help of connected apps, how you can use it. Okay, so I will show you the two things, like particularly like how to call the we can say Salesforce API from Postman using the particularly this connected apps. Okay. Also, we are going to call the this API from the another Salesforce org as well. Okay. Or either we can particularly use the Java. We can use a JavaScript code as well. Okay, to call that API. So we will take some demos to cover this. Okay. So this is my particularly Salesforce API. This API gives the account information. Okay. So what is my particularly API URL? This is my API URL. I will just add into here. Okay, this is my API URL. Okay, this is the base endpoint URL. And then REST resource is that, sorry, so spelling mistake. This is my base URL. I'm just giving the naming convention base URL. Okay. This is base URL. And what is your REST resource? REST resource will be the this one /sf account. This is my REST resource name. So what will be the complete endpoint? Complete endpoint will be the your base URL, right? Sorry, your base URL. Okay. Then /services/apex REST, which is the we can say generalized concept, and then your resource name. Okay, this is particularly your endpoint URL. Now, any third-party systems are wants to call this API. Okay, any third-party systems wants to call it. Now I'm just hitting this API from the browser itself. See, it is giving me the error. I'm just calling this API. Okay, this is my particularly endpoint URL, and it is giving me like invalid session ID or session expired, right? Because I am using the Salesforce base URL, and that base URL needs to be we can say authenticated particularly, right? So we cannot directly connect particularly the with the Salesforce API from the external system. Okay, with the help of base URL, it will always give this error. So obviously, if you want to particularly we can say integrate external system with Salesforce, you need to use the connected apps. You need to use the connected apps out there. Let me just remove this one. Okay, so connected app is the framework that enables external application to integrate with Salesforce using API and standard protocols as well. Okay, so if I want to call this particular API, so we need that. Okay, particularly we will call this API from JavaScript itself as well. Okay, so for the connected app, what you need to do, you need to go to the connected app section. Okay, in the manage connected apps, you will see what will be the different connected app created. Okay, you can create a connected app as well. What you have to do, you need to go to the app manager. Okay, in the app manager, you can create a new connected app. Basically, okay, you can create a new connected app here. Okay, click on new connected app. Okay, and you can enable the authentication setting and all. Okay, now the main important thing or main important concept is that I want to call this API from the JavaScript. Okay, I want to call this API from the JavaScript. So obviously, we need the some authentication, right? We cannot directly call. Okay, so we will just write some JavaScript code basically. You can particularly call REST API from JavaScript. I'm just giving one example to you. Okay. This is the multiple ways to hit the API, right? There are multiple ways basically to hit the API. So let me just particularly use this way. Okay. XML HTTP request. Okay. I want to particularly hit the API. So obviously I will call out. So what I will do, I will just use that. One second. I'm just particularly looking for one example so I can use that one. There is a fetch method as well, and there is a this one as well. Okay. Particularly, this is also the option are available. HTTP, XML HTTP request. Okay. Fetch method is also there. Okay. This you can particularly create and you can particularly call the APIs are there. Okay. But we can use the fetch method as well. We can use a fetch method as well. Okay, see, XML, HTTP and fetch method. So these are the two multiple ways. Okay. We have the fetch method as well, so that we can use. So, but instead of that, we will particularly use this one. Okay. These examples to call the API. So consider this JavaScript is the third-party systems, and obviously you need to connect that. As I said, Connected App is a framework that enables external application to integrate with Salesforce. So this is my API, right? This is my API endpoint URL. Now I want to connect with the particularly with Salesforce and need to fetch the data, right? So obviously I need that. So what I will do, I will create a one particularly XML HTTP request. Then I can use the request. This is the HTTP request. So we have the open method are available. Okay. Open method, you have to pass the endpoint URL and method. Okay. So I will just pass. This is the post method. Okay. So if you saw here, we have created the HTTP post method. Okay. HTTP post method basically, and then we have to pass the URL. Okay. So URL will be this type of like this. So I'm just adding this particularly this one. Okay. See this one. This is particularly my URL. Okay. And then this is semicolon, and then we have to click on, we have to use the send method. Okay. And if there is anything, and we can get the response, whatever the response are there, that response will be particularly we can receive. Okay. Request.response, that will be a consider. Okay. So if I hit this one, okay. See, this is we are getting unauthorized. Okay. See this one. This is the post method. We have got the error. Let's say particularly we got the one error as well, like access control header, right? And we have got that like it is unauthorized basically, right? So obviously we need to be authorize that API, right? So Connected App will give that functionality basically to connect external systems with that. So how to do that? So basically you have to create a Connected App to give the, we can say, give the functionality to authenticate your Salesforce from the external systems. Okay. So I will create a Connected App here. Okay. And how to call that? I will give you the one demo. Okay. From Postman and from the Apex itself. Okay. So I am creating one Connected App. Let's say, for example, my sample, we can say Connected App. My REST API Connected App. Okay. This is particularly contact email. If you want to put, you need to put that email. Then URL, these are the basic things. Then you need to enable the OAuth setting, right? Authentication setting, like what particularly you need to give, right? Obviously, you need to give the, we can say, authorization, what type, using what type of data you will particularly allow user to access, right? So there will be the one section called as OAuth scope. So this OAuth scope is nothing but a what type of data access you are providing through this connected app. Okay, OAuth scope means particularly what type of data access you are doing to the external system via this connected app. So there are multiple APIs scopes, OAuth scopes are available here. You can see there are lots of are there, but there is some of the mainly used are there. Okay, for example, full access. You need to give the full access are there, right? Manage user data via API. Let's say if you are building some APIs are there, right? So that API, via that API, you need to give the functionality to the external systems to connect the, we can say, manage the data and get the access of that data, right? So these are the, we can say, multiple scopes are available, okay, via API, and that you have to give it basically. Callback URL. Callback URL is nothing but a, we can say, is used for the calling back. So you have to use the particularly any callback URL that you want to particular. Once the API is it, you need to call back that URL. Okay. So you have to enter that callback URL and you have to enter the, we can say, add the OAuth scope basically. So now what I will do, I will just use the login.salesforce.com. This is the simple login callback URL. Once the API will it, this particular URL will be the used. Okay. And that scope, for now, I am using a full access. Okay, full access will be the give the functionality to access all type of data inside Salesforce. And also, I will add the manage user data via API because we are using the APIs are there. Okay. Then if you want to use a SAML or any other things are there, so this will be the other extra settings also available in the connected app. Okay. So now let me click on save. It will take some times to create that particular connected app. Okay, you can click on continue. Now you can use this connected app, and so this connected app will give you the consumer key, secret key, and the, we can say, these are the two things will be a given via this connected app. Okay, one is a particularly consumer key and the secret key. See, consumer key and secret key, these are the main important thing for the authentication. Okay, so if I want to call this API, I want two things. One is a consumer key and second is a secret key. Okay, so to call this API for the authentication purpose, you need 2 to 3 things. Well, first one is a username and password. Okay, then you need the security token for the user, that is always there. Then third one is that particularly a secret key, consumer key, and fourth one is that secret key. These are the 4 things are required: username, password, security token, consumer key, and secret key. So username and password you have already there, right? So particularly I have already a username for this user. Let me just go to this users basically. So I want to use this user for the authentication. Okay, so I have already a username, right? You can see this is the username. Password is also there. So let me just particularly use username. And then you need a password. Password, let's say I already have. Okay, so this is the password. Then you need a security token. From where you will get a security token? See, when I'm hitting the API, we got the error, right? We got the error like it is unauthorized, or we can say it is blocked, right? So why? Because we did not authenticated that particular, we can say, system, Salesforce system, right? So obviously you need some authentication data. So that authentication data you need to collect, and then you can pass to the external system. And then that external system will use this particular authentication information to call the API, any Salesforce API. Okay. Now security token. So how you can set a security token? You have to go to your settings. You can click on this icon. You have to go to the settings option. And here you will get a reset my security token. If you are aware about the security token, don't reset it. Okay. Security token always reset when you change the password. Okay. So if you are already aware about what is the security token value, so don't reset it. It will be again problematic for the authentication. If you are not aware of it, then you can reset. Okay. So if you click on receive security token, so it will send to the email address. Okay. So what is security token? Basically, when you access a Salesforce from the IP address that is not trusted for your company, okay, and you can use a desktop client on or the API. Okay, so you need the security token. So if you want to access Salesforce from this other systems, you need the security token. Okay, you need security token to log in. What is security token? It is a case sensitive alphanumeric code that is tied with your password. Whenever your password resets, security token is also written. So security token will be the one, we can say, crucial parameter for the authenticating the we can say to access the Salesforce we can say endpoints. Okay, so security token is always important, and you have to use the security token with password. Okay, so now let me go to the security. So it is received on my email address. So I have to go to my email address to check that. So say now I have got your new Salesforce security token. So this is my, see this one, this is the security token. I'm just copying this security token. So my username, password, security token are ready. Now I need a consumer key. So I have already created the connected app. So this connected app will give you the consumer key and consumer secret key for to connect with the, and connected app will have the responsibility to give the what type of access with the help of OAuth scope. Okay, basically. So let me click on this. So you have to click on this button to get the secret key and all. Okay, again it will ask verification code. So let me just verify that identity. So see now, consumer key and consumer secret key. So you have to copy this consumer key. Okay, and this is the consumer secret key. This is also you need it. So this is the information you need it to authenticate your Salesforce system from the external system. Okay, this is very important part for the authentication. Username, password, security token, consumer key, and consumer secret key. Okay, so my point was that we can say connected app in Salesforce. So connected app is a framework that enables external application to integrate with Salesforce using APIs and standard protocol. So we can say if you want to use or call this API, you need this authentication things to be to connect with Salesforce API, right? So, but for this purpose, actually, you need two things. You need an access token, because without access token, you cannot access API. Okay, you cannot authorize basically. So access token will be a get via this particular authentication parameters. Okay, so these are the authentication parameters. Okay, these are the authentication parameter will give you the access token, and access token will able to use to authorize this endpoint URL. Okay, able to authorize this endpoint URL basically. So how to do that? We will particularly check it out. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll use the basically Postman tool to get the access token, and then we will hit that API. Okay, so get the access token, what you need? I will give you the one idea about that. Yeah. Are you able to see this image clearly? I just zoom it out. Can you just anyone confirm?
Yep, I can see.
Okay. So now you got that. You need to call this Salesforce API from the external system. You can consider any external systems are there. Okay. But we are not able to call that API because of with the help of because of authentication, right? Because it will be unauthorized whenever I'm hitting. Okay. So if you want to authorize that, you need to be a one thing needed, that is authorization or access token. So client consider, you can consider any client. Okay. Any client, either you are using Java, either using Oracle or other system to call that. You need a first authorization. Authorization is nothing but we can say access token or request token will be given with the help of username and password. And then you can particularly send out the request data or with the access token. Okay, so this is particularly your resource URL. This is your SF account is a resource, REST API resource. Okay, this is a REST API resource. So this REST API resource will give the accounts records from in Salesforce. Matlab say from the whatever the records are available, this API resource will give that. But when it will give you, you need to pass the access token. Okay, access tokens will be there. So basically, you need to request that token with the help of your authentication parameter with username and password, and authorization server will particularly gives the access token, and then access token with the help of that access token, you can access the resource server. Okay, whatever are there. So basically, that will be authenticated. So access token will be always required. Okay, to we can say use. So connected app will be help that. Okay, so to get that particularly we can say access token, you need a authorization URL. Okay, so let me just go to the token URL Salesforce, because we are using OAuth 2.0 to authenticate that. So obviously you need the token URL. This is the endpoint URL. Salesforce instance OAuth 2.0 token endpoint connected app as an OAuth token. So this is the URL you need it. Okay. This is the URL to get the access token. Okay. Your login.salesforce means your base URL. So this is my base URL. Okay. I can use this base URL. This is my base URL. Particularly that services / OAuth token. Okay. And this particular, we can say, this resource will give you the access token, and that access token you can use to call the endpoint URL. So how to call that? Let me just copy paste this. So we'll use the postman first. Okay. And then this will be the post method basically. Okay. And then you need to pass the parameters here. So you need to pass, this is not a, we can say, body parameter. This is the, we can say, particularly, I can say the URL parameters. Okay. So you need to pass it. You need to pass username, password are there. So what I will do, I will just use a username, password. Okay. Then again, one thing you have to use grant type. You need to use a grant type basically. Okay. I will talk about the grant type as well. Username, password. Okay. Grant type, username, password. Then client secret. Okay. Let me go you to the documentation. I'm directly using Salesforce. Yeah, this is the one. Then particularly client ID and secret key are there. Grant type are there. So what is grant type? So basically, grant type is used to make sure your new endpoints which grants type of the client applications want to use. Okay. So basically, what type of authentication you are following? So we are using a username and passwords based OAuth 2.0, right? Authentication are there. So there are the OAuth grant types are there. Okay, particularly. So these are the grant types that you can particularly use for the authorization. So we are using a particularly password based grant type, right? Password based are there. So you have to use a password. Okay. Then you need to put your username. So my username is this one, SFDC integration @bootcamp.com. You need to add a password. So this is my password. And with the password, actually, you need to use this security token. We have to type that security token. That is mandatory. Okay. Then you need a client ID and client secret key. So you can client ID. You need a client ID. Then again, you need a client secret. Okay. Client ID have already got that using the connected app, right? Connected app is we have used for the. So consumer key is nothing but a basically we are using this consumer key as a client ID. Okay, and client secret key are there. This is my client secret key. Okay, so this particular OAuth 2.0 token URL will give you the token, access token. And with the help of that access token, you can aid the API basically. Okay, let me just click on the send. Once I click send, see this one. Are you able to see this response? Or I need to make it zoom?
We can see. Yeah.
Okay.
It's clear.
So this is the access token, right? If you see, this is the access token was written, and this access token we have to use for the call hit this access this API resource, whatever the API are there, right? So now what I will do, let me just copy this access token. Now, are you remember we have used this endpoint URL? Let me copy this endpoint URL now. See, I'm just copying this endpoint URL. SF account. And I will use the same postman are there. So this is also post API. So I will use the post. And in the header parameter, you need to use authorization. Authorization as a particularly authorization as a key parameter in header. And then you need to copy this particular access token. This access token will be the very important part to hit that, because this particular authorization token URL will give you the access token for that. Means it is I very identified. This is particularly resource is valid, right? If I am accessing anyone's data, so I need to be authenticated, because without authentication, how I can provide my data access, right? Similar like we are using the ATMs, right? So we have the ATM pins, right? So I cannot give the anyone's to my ATM pin, right? And I need to be that like switch to be a trusted. If that trusted resource are there, then I can pass on that information, because it will be a very crucial information to access my data, right? So similar like access token will be also there, right? So access token will be given by the token authorization URLs, token URLs. So these token URLs will use to get the access token, and that access token will use to hit the APIs. Okay. So it is a bearer token basically. You have to use this one. I think I missed that spelling. It's a bearer token. So you have to particularly use this keyword basically as a bearer token. So this is my particularly authorization URL, and then I click on send. See, my data is received. Okay. If I did not use authorization, let me just click on send. See, I got the error. Session expired or session invalid. Okay. When I'm using authorization, and this access token will allow us to access the data because it is authenticated. Now I'm getting the data. Whatever the response is written from this API, I'm able to access that data basically. Right. So this is about the particularly this one that you can use, and you can call that. Okay. So I'm using this particularly Postman tool that we can call this API. So what you have to do, you have to particularly hit this API first. Then this will returns the, we can say, access token, and then access token you can use for the other API callout. Okay, so that will be there. The one example is that I'm using here. Let me just show you to the that I have already used that one. See, this is my different org. This is my different org basically. And I'm using what I'm using. See this one. I'm maintaining client ID, client secret key, username, password are there. Okay. And then first I'm hitting this authorization token URL, OAuth token URL. I'm returning the token, and then I'm using token to hit the main endpoint URL. Right. So basically you need to, if you want to particularly connect external, we can say connect Salesforce system with external, means external system will call the Salesforce API. So obviously that external system responsibility to get the token first. Okay. And then once that token is received, then you can hit that particular API, that particular resource. Okay. As I showed you into that particular image. 1 second, let me show you. This one. Client application is hitting the request token. You need that. Once request token is received, you can request that data with the access token from the resource server. So this will be the your main cancer REST API resource, which will give the data. Okay. So this is about the particularly the connected apps and all things. Okay. Basically. So these are the three important points that needs to be understand. Okay. Like remote site setting and name credential will be the, we can say, if you want to call any external system from Salesforce, so you need to use that name, remote site and name credentials. Okay. Connected app is used to, we can say, give the access of your Salesforce system to external system. Okay. That is the connected app. So these are the both vice versa. Okay. So in the next session, actually, we are going to cover about the some of the, we can say, name credentials examples that we will particularly authenticate the any system. So most probably next week, next Saturday, we have another schedule session is scheduled. If you go to the our particularly integration session 4, right? So we have covering the name credential, authentication, and basic OAuth. So I'm working on the one of the, we can say, Java-based applications that we will call from the Salesforce itself. Okay. And from that, we are going to use the name credentials to authenticate that. Okay. So that we will cover. So the today's session agenda is to give you the more highlights on the remote site setting, name credentials, and the connected app. Okay. And we have used the username and password based with the help of access token to authenticate the Salesforce system and call the APIs. Okay. Yeah. So this is basically some of the basic points from my side for the today's session. Yeah. If you have any questions or doubt, you can just discuss. We will discuss that.